So the client throws a fit now twice in the last 3 days.
Some announcements bring excitement.
I don't think he's going to forgive Harry.
Others bring clarity.
Him not being invited to the White House next year.
This one brought both, just not for Harry. When the palace announced who would attend the United States state visit, everyone seemed happy.
When the royals are going to come for the July 4th celebration of 250-year anniversary for America.
Except the one man whose name was missing. And judging by his sudden comments on American politics, he did not take the news well.
And literally, King Charles came out in a story saying there will not be a detour, meaning that the idiot and his fake black wife will have no part in anything having to do with that state visit.
It all started with what should have been simple royal business: a schedule, a confirmation, an announcement about who would represent the monarchy during next year's big United States state visit. But the reaction it caused in Montecito turned a routine update into something much bigger. The palace named the king, the queen, and the prince and princess of Wales. It was a clear list and it was complete. There was no maybe, no room for guessing. Harry was not on it. And that message, delivered so calmly by the palace, hit hard. The phrase, "no detours," in the palace's statement might have sounded like simple planning to most people. But to Harry, it was clearly personal. It meant this visit would not include reunions, compromises, or carefully planned moments of family unity. It announced, without emotion or apology, that the monarchy no longer plans around the Sussexes' feelings.
What does Harry do? He goes and he starts talking about politics. First, it was on Monday when he made that ridiculous speech in Canada that nobody was there, which you and I saw. Literally, like 100 people showed up because Harry's irrelevant.
For a man who once thought he would always have a place in royal events, even from far away, the message felt final. What happened next in Montecito was not an official response. It was not even a calm one. Instead, Harry started making public comments about American leadership, jumping into political discussions he has been told to avoid. The timing was so obvious, so clearly connected to the palace announcement, that it left little doubt about what caused the sudden change. His remarks did not sound like someone sharing insights. They sounded more like someone trying very hard to show he still matters at the exact moment the institution he left showed how easily it can move on without him. People noticed that Harry's tone changed almost overnight. His speech in Canada showed the first signs: awkward timing, pointed statements, and the kind of comments that showed frustration rather than real conviction.
We're in America now, and we don't give a shit about you. You're not our fucking prince. You'll never be king. We hate your wife. Stay at home in your $29 million man.
His remark about America electing a king carried irony that people picked up on. After all, Harry has spent the past 4 years saying he wants nothing to do with monarchy while repeatedly using the privileges, titles, and treatment that come with it. The public noticed the contradiction, as did those who have watched his story change each time the palace leaves him out of something important. This is where the real tension lies. The palace's decision did not just exclude Harry from a major diplomatic moment, it showed the growing gap between what he says in public and what he expects in private. When the royals appear on the world stage next year, celebrated, respected, and unified, the absence will be obvious, whether he talks about it or not. And Harry's sudden political comments made one thing clear: he felt that absence right away, long before the visit has even happened.
He says when he was asked about being a good leader, quote, "We know what is not right. We have a very good demonstration of exactly what isn't," meaning the person in the White House right now.
The reaction after the palace's announcement did not start loud. It began with a change in Harry's public tone, a tension that slipped into his speeches and statements before anyone even mentioned the state visit directly. His sudden jump into political talk surprised many, not because he cannot express an opinion, but because the timing felt too perfect. The comments came just hours after the palace confirmed the list of attendees, a list that did not include him, and the connection was hard to miss. Critics noticed right away that his words had a sharper edge than usual. What sounded like thoughts on leadership turned into something more emotional, less controlled. It had the feel of someone hiding disappointment with pointed analysis, much like a celebrity offering advice after finding out their name was not on an invitation they thought they would get. Even the kindest interpretation struggled to see the remarks as anything other than frustration dressed up in formal language.
Now that was one thing. But then he goes on to say that America elected a king. because apparently we're so obsessed with royals. No, Harry, we're actually very obsessed with laughing at you and your testicle head.
His comments about American leadership raised even more eyebrows. It takes real boldness to criticize the government of a country that is still reviewing your residency papers, especially when your own past admissions have already made things complicated. The public could not help noticing the irony. Harry seemed eager to position himself as an expert on American government while dealing with a visa situation that depends on the very administration he was criticizing. It was the kind of mistake that might have been smart if there were any signs of strategy behind it. Then came the line that got the most attention, his claim that America had basically elected a king. Said with the seriousness of someone convinced they are making a deep point, the comment instead showed the contradiction at the heart of Harry's public image. He has spent years saying he wants nothing to do with monarchy, titles, or tradition, yet he continues to act as though those things still shape the world around him. It becomes hard to separate the man rejecting the crown from the man who still expects royal treatment. While Harry's remarks spread online, palace sources stayed noticeably calm.
Now, I have to tell you, why is Harry doing this? Why would he talk about politics and the president twice in 1 week? Because he's crying like a little child.
There were no counterstatements, no explanations, and no quiet attempts to soften his exclusion from the state visit. The schedule moved forward unchanged, a sign that the institution had expected this kind of reaction long before the announcement went public. In London, the royal household continued its preparations. In Montecito, the emotional reaction grew more visible with each interview clip. What stood out most was not what Harry said, but the contrast it created. The palace projected stability and unity ahead of a major diplomatic moment. Harry projected urgency, irritation, and a need to insert himself into a conversation that was no longer about him. Even supporters found it hard to explain why he chose this moment, of all moments, to step into political debate with such intensity. By the time the headline settled, one thing had become crystal clear. His reaction did not change the palace's plans. It only proved they were right to leave him out.
There is a 13-year-old boy crying, "Oh, I need to get out, Dad, Mom." Megan, because Megan's his mommy. "Mommy, Megan, please, I need to get out."
As attention turned to the royal family's preparations for the state visit, another contrast appeared, one that added even more weight to Harry's reaction. While the palace moved forward with quiet confidence, Harry's public appearances took on a noticeably unsettled feel. His speeches seemed rehearsed but restless, polished but strained, as though he were trying to balance the image of a global helper with the frustration of someone who felt pushed aside at a moment he thought should have included him. It was not dramatic enough to be a meltdown, but it had the clear energy of someone who had expected a different outcome. His Canadian appearance was the clearest example. Instead of giving a calm message about leadership and service, he drifted into comments that felt oddly specific and strangely pointed. People in the audience described a speech that wandered between personal frustration and attempts at sounding important, never fully landing in either place. It gave the impression of a man trying to show disappointment without saying so directly, like slamming a door quietly and hoping someone notices. What made the situation even stranger was how these remarks contrasted with the palace's silence.
Like, why are you gonna throw a fit, dude? I don't understand. And especially the timing. They announced that the royal family's coming, right? To which, what's the headline? Oh, Harry and Meghan aren't invited.
For years, Harry had said he wanted privacy, distance, and independence from royal expectations. Yet when the palace respected that distance, he responded as though he had been cut out of something he'd never planned to be part of. It is hard to demand separation while also resenting it, but that is the tension Harry has been dealing with ever since stepping away from the monarchy. His comments about America electing a king became a talking point for observers. Said as though he were offering a deep insight about society, the line instead showed the complexity of his relationship with the institution he left behind. It is an unusual argument to make when you were born into royalty, walked away from it, and then repeatedly showed frustration when treated like someone who is no longer part of the system. The irony was subtle but clear, and audiences picked up on it quickly. Meanwhile, preparations in London continued without pause. William took briefings. Diplomatic teams worked on schedules. The king's advisors refined the messaging around the visit. Everything happened with the ease of an institution used to moving forward regardless of individual dramas. The lack of response to Harry's comments was not dismissive. It was simply a reflection of priorities.
To which King Charles then comes out and says, yeah, there's not going to be any detours. We're not going to deal with them. To which then Harry throws a fit, talking about politics, talking about the leader of the United States.
The visit was bigger than one person's feelings, and the palace had already made its choices. In this context, Harry's comments stood out even more. His attempts to put himself back in the conversation looked less like leadership and more like someone trying to stay visible as events move on without him. The public may not have known the full story, but they could sense what was happening. A man who wanted independence, now wanting inclusion, but only on his own terms. By the end of the week, the story had settled into place. The palace was moving confidently toward a historic moment. Harry was moving emotionally in the opposite direction. And the distance between those paths was growing, whether he admitted it publicly or not. As the royal visit drew closer, what became clearer was how differently the two worlds now worked. In London, the tone was steady, dignified, and focused on diplomacy. In Montecito, the mood seemed to change with the news cycle, and Harry's public behavior showed that unease. People noticed that his interviews and appearances had an emotional edge that was not there during his earlier advocacy work. There was tension behind his words, the kind that appears when someone senses the spotlight moving toward others and tries to pull it back without being too obvious. The comparison to William did not help. While Harry's comments seemed reactive, William showed calm authority, preparing for the visit with the confidence of someone who knows exactly where he belongs.
You have no business talking about what's going on here in this country, much less talking about something that you chose to pull yourself out of. Hey, Harry, we all have a message for you. We're talking directly to ya. If you were a working royal, you would be invited to next year's state visit.
The contrast was not forced. It happened naturally. William appeared in briefings, spoke thoughtfully about upcoming events, and showed the qualities expected of a future king. Harry, meanwhile, seemed caught between frustration and the need to prove he still mattered. Even supporters found it hard to ignore the growing gap in how the brothers handled their roles, one based in duty, the other based in trying to redefine himself without fully letting go of the title that once defined him. Inside palace circles, the decision to exclude Harry from the visit was seen as practical rather than punishment. The focus was on unity, stability, and presenting a united front. Including Harry would have brought unpredictability, something the palace has grown less willing to deal with. The no detours phrase may have sounded harsh to outsiders, but internally it was simply a boundary, one that showed the monarchy had no interest in revisiting old tensions during a moment of international importance. In Montecito, however, that boundary hit differently. Those close to Harry suggested he had believed even quietly that major events would still include him, if only symbolically. The reality that the palace no longer shaped its decisions around his reactions was hard to ignore. His public comments hinted at a deeper truth. For all the talk of newfound freedom, he still expected some level of recognition from the institution he left behind. When that recognition did not come, the disappointment showed through his attempts to sound important. Even Meghan's usual media presence stayed noticeably quiet. There were no strategically timed opinion pieces, no glossy photo releases, no planned moments designed to shift the story back to them. Instead, the silence suggested they knew this particular moment was not one they could easily spin in their favor. It left Harry standing alone in the public eye, his comments unprotected and increasingly examined. What made the situation more striking was that the palace did not need to respond. They did not correct him, argue with him, or try to soften the tension. They simply continued forward, their silence speaking more clearly than any statement could. And the more they stayed quiet, the more Harry's reactions drew attention on their own, or in some cases, their own contradictions. By the time preparations for the visit were well underway, the contrast between Harry's emotional struggle and the palace's steadiness had become a story of its own. As the story continued, the spotlight slowly shifted from the details of the state visit to what it symbolized. For the royal family, the trip represented unity, longevity, and the strength of the crown's relationship with the United States. For Harry, it represented something far more personal, a reminder of everything he once had access to and everything he now watches from a distance. And that distance, emotional, physical, and symbolic, grew more visible by the day. Observers began pointing out what many already sensed. Harry's frustration was not just about the visit itself, it was about what the visit represented. Seeing his father and brother welcomed on the world stage while he stayed on the sidelines brought up questions he has tried to avoid since stepping back from royal duties. Would he ever again have a meaningful position within the monarchy? Did the institution see him as someone who could be trusted in high-stakes diplomatic settings? And perhaps the most uncomfortable question of all, had the palace finally decided that involving him created more problems than solutions? Meanwhile, William's rising visibility added another layer to the tension. His steady presence, calm communication, and growing statesman-like manner showed the role he is preparing to inherit. There were no dramatic speeches, no pointed remarks, no last-minute attempts to control headlines. He simply carried out his responsibilities with the quiet confidence expected of a future king. The contrast with Harry's sudden bursts of commentary was almost like a movie, as though the brothers were unknowingly acting out two very different stories on separate stages. In Montecito, the silence around Meghan's usual media efforts was notable. The lack of planned statements or strategically timed appearances hinted at an awareness that this situation required restraint. Any attempt to push themselves back into the conversation risked drawing attention to the palace's clear decision to exclude them. And so, public reaction landed squarely on Harry, his words examined more closely with each interview and each speech. The irony of the situation did not go unnoticed. After years of emphasizing independence and freedom from royal expectations, Harry now found himself frustrated by the results of that independence. He had stepped away to escape the structure of royal life, yet his reaction to being left out suggested he still expected some form of inclusion, or at least acknowledgement. It was a contradiction that even casual observers could see. The desire to reject the monarchy paired with the desire to remain central to it. By the time the palace finalized its plans, the contrast between the two worlds had become clear. The royals were moving forward with a united front, prepared for a historic visit representing continuity and diplomacy. Harry, on the other hand, was dealing with the emotional reality of understanding that the monarchy had adapted to life without him. His attempts to reassert his voice, while noticeable, did little to change the larger direction. In the end, nothing about the palace's plans changed. The lineup stayed the same, the message stayed the same, and the silence stayed the same. What changed was public perception, not of the royal family, but of Harry. His reaction revealed more than any official statement could. It showed a man dealing with the reality that the institution he distanced himself from is now comfortable working without him. And as the visit approaches, that reality becomes clearer. The royal family is preparing for the world stage, while Harry is left watching from the sidelines, hoping his comments can fill the space where his presence used to be.